for the first time in my life, it is not considered weird to move a conversation very quickly from how are you to well, how are you building your immune system?
Welcome back to another episode of Health and Humanity. Our guest today is Joel Salatin. Joel calls himself a Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. Others like to call him the most famous farmer in the world, the high priest of the pasture, and the most eclectic thinker from Virginia since Thomas Jefferson. An incredibly prolific writer with 12 published books and a thriving multi-generational family farm, he draws on a lifetime of food, farming, and fantasy to entertain and inspire audiences around the world. He's as comfortable moving cows in a pasture as addressing CEOs in a Wall Street business conference. His wide-ranging topics include nitty-gritty how-to profitable regenerative farming, as well as cultural philosophy like orthodoxy versus heresy. He co-owns with his family Polyface Farm in Swope, Virginia. Featured in the New York Times bestseller Omnivore's Dilemma and award-winning documentary Food, Inc., the farm services more than 5,000 families, 50 restaurants, 10 retail outlets, and a farmer's market with salad bar beef, pigerator pork, pastured poultry, and forestry products. When he's not on the road speaking, he's at home on the farm, keeping the calluses on his hands and dirt under his fingernails. Mentoring young people, inspiring visitors, and promoting local regenerative food and farming systems. Joel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dan. It's a real honor and a privilege to be with you.
Yeah, this is really great. I'm really happy how we got connected here. I interviewed Dr. Sina McCullough a few weeks ago, who you co-wrote. I have your new book here, Beyond Labels. And at the end of our conversation with Dr. Sina, she mentioned that maybe I could get connected with you. So I'm really happy that we've connected, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, thank you. I am too.
Yeah, great. And as I mentioned, in the bio, you were featured in the documentary Food, Inc. You were in the notable book Omnivore's Dilemma. Why don't we talk a bit about kind of how you came to the public view? I know you've been practicing your methods of regenerative farming for a very long time. And then you kind of came to the forefront of, being a little bit more popular in the farming world. I think from, being in that documentary, Food, Inc., and the book Omnivore's Dilemma. And I think really that's when people started paying attention to the work that you're doing. Even though you've been doing it for a very long time. Is that the case?
Yeah, close. But we had already, Teresa and I got married in 1980. I grew up here on the farm. Mm-hmm. My mom was a school teacher. Dad was an accountant. And they never made a living from the farm. In typical, first generation startup, they worked off the farm and saved their pennies and paid the mortgage. So when I came along through high school, finally, and into college, the farm was paid for, but it was not a business. It was not a going concern. Great place to grow up, learn a lot, have forts and build, dams in the creek and all the stuff that farm kids enjoy, and chores. And we ate well. We had a big garden and milked a couple cows and made ice cream and cottage cheese and, butter, and grew up that way, and grew up on a steady diet of, Mother Earth News magazine and Organic Gardening and Farming magazine, those kinds of things. And our farming friends were composters and hippies, and, the bearded, braless, Woodstock, generation back to the land. Mm-hmm. And even though our family, religiously was a kind of conservative Christian family, so we had one set of friends in our spiritual community and another set of friends kind of in our farming community. So I started with my first chickens when I was 10 years old, and I always wanted to farm full time, but didn't see a good pathway in initially. Mm-hmm. And Teresa and I got married in 1980, and I worked off the farm then as a newspaper reporter for a couple of years, always scheming, how do I get back here, full time? Mm-hmm. and we actually saved up enough money that we could live here for 1 year. And by that time I realized how employable I was. I mean, I was not stupid, but I wasn't afraid of hard work. I wasn't afraid to wash dishes, push a wheelbarrow full of concrete. And as I talked to business people around, I realized, well, everybody wants someone who's willing to work hard, put in a full day, and has a brain, and a strong back doesn't hurt. And so when I realized how employable I was, I said, you know what? If we run through our nest egg in a year, we'll get so much farther ahead on farm projects that maybe it'll cut our time away, from 15 years to 10 or whatever.
Sure.
And so we did that. We drove a $50 car. We lived in the attic of the old farmhouse. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. My point is we lived very, very cheaply on just a few $100s a month. And we shepherded that little nest egg along. And as it turned out, it was tight. It was very, very tight, but I never went back off farm to work. Well, then within about 7 or 8 years, we started actually, making money. We put money in the bank and the farming community, I mean, the sustainable farming community, started to take notice and said, how does a young couple with no financial equity, nothing, they don't have Swiss bank accounts, they're not independently wealthy, how do they make it bootstrap a small farm like this? Now, fortunately, I had the land. I didn't have to buy the land. So I stand on the shoulders of greatness, and I recognize that mom and dad put their life savings in paying for the land, the launch pad, if you will. And Teresa and I, then we had to build the rocket, if you will. And so we built this rocket. As it started to take off, it attracted attention. So by 1989, 1990, we were actually getting some publicity. Media was coming. There were stories written, and of course the pastured poultry we were doing was really unusual. Chickens out on the field. I mean, that was just way out there. And of course, it was beautiful. It was photogenic. Yep. So anybody behind a camera loved the eggmobile and the chickens in the green grass. And I mean, everybody's seen cows in green grass.
Right.
Chickens in green grass is another whole level, and the whole multi-speciation and all that kind of stuff. And so I started getting asked to speak at conferences by 1991, and then people started asking me, how do you do this? So we wrote our first little kind of Xerox manual. Remember Xerox machines? Maybe you don't remember that.
I do.
You do? All right.
I'm not that young.
You look like you're about 16. So
I'm 28 for the record. But
so anyway, we made our first little pastured poultry manual in 1991. And by that time, I was writing columns for the Stockman Grass Farmer magazine, became great friends with the founder and my mentor there, Alan Nation. And he encouraged me, and the little manual sold well. And I said, oh, man, there's money in this here educational stuff, And he said, you really ought to, make it a true book, not just a little, kind of glorified brochure.
Sure.
So in 93, we did Pastured Poultry Profits, sold it through Stockman Grass Farmer. And then things just started to develop. 2 years later, Salad Bar Beef. 2 years later, You Can Farm, and that really sold. That really opened it up. You Can Farm it still is kind of my my bestseller. And so by the time, here's the thing, by the time Michael Pollan wrote Omnivore's Dilemma and made the call to us, I was already that's why he found us, was because we were kind of a leader in this community. And all I can say is that if we were at X, by the time Michael Pollan finished with us and Food Inc. finished with us, we were at 2X. It was a multiple. It was a leverage. It was another spin on the wheel, and it just took everything we did. It gave me a bigger platform, a bigger pulpit. It just spun everything to a bigger place.
Yeah. Did that exposure, being on those larger media platforms, the documentary, the Omnivore's Dilemma, did that exposure kind of amplify that need for change in how we produce our food?
Well, sure. I mean, look, the Omnivore's Dilemma. Well, I mean, I kind of look back. Fast Food Nation by Alan Schlosser
Hmm.
was a precursor to Omnivore's Dilemma. I mean, I would say in this integrity food genre, as people began to question the industrial food system, and so you had Fast Food Nation, which was just shocking. It was
Mm.
just profound. And then you had Omnivore's Dilemma, and then you had a visual representation of Omnivore's Dilemma. Michael Pollan worked very closely on developing Food Inc.,
Okay.
which of course was a award-winning documentary,
Hmm.
and that really ramped up the conversation. It
Right.
it, it moved the conversation. I can remember like yesterday, with 6 months for 6 months after Food Inc. came out, um, our farm store was full every Saturday with people coming saying, I saw this movie. I went home. I threw out everything in the pantry. I'm
Yep.
going to completely change the way I eat. And it was remarkable. It was just remarkable.
Yeah. So your methods of regenerative farming on Polyface Farm. Why don't we maybe start with what regenerative farming is and how does that relate to what people were seeing in Food Inc. And you say they now just kind of flooded to your farm. Maybe touch on that a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, our advantage was that in Food Inc. we were the good guys, so and Food Inc. Wonderful documentary,
Hmm.
but the one negative from it was that it was kind of a downer. People, I mean, fortunately, people who lived within a couple of hours from us, yeah, they just got in the car and drove here,
Wow.
like pilgrims.
Yeah.
We're going to Mecca, right? All right, but but a lot of people couldn't do that, and the movie actually didn't give you a lot of alternatives. I mean, it
Hmm.
just, you walked out kind of just in shock. Oh no, what do I do now? And um and so if there was a weakness in it, that would probably be it. And so I think that movie created a tsunami of demand for our kind of food, um, when there weren't enough farmers to meet that demand that
Right.
fast.
Right.
And what that does is that frustrates people. And when people get frustrated, they just, oh, forget it. It's too hard. It's blah blah blah. And we didn't have Amazon back then. We didn't have shipping. We didn't have the ability to actually circumvent a local region that was bereft of an option, of an integrity food option. When that
Mm.
didn't exist in a locality, there wasn't really an alternative. And
Interesting.
because of the ubiquitousness of shipping, and the cheapness of it, with logistics and everything else, that that is now no longer an excuse. If somebody in the urban sector, if they see the light and they become converted, they can't say, well, I can't find it, it doesn't exist. No. I mean, we ship nationwide now. Many food crafters ship nationwide,
Hmm.
and it's very, very available. And that has literally come since 2000. Literally, I mean, think back. That's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Look at the development of online shopping carts,
Yep.
shipping, logistics, distribution. I mean, it's incredible. And now the pandemic has just exponentially increased that into overdrive. I
Yeah.
don't know what the future of bricks and mortar stores is going to be. I mean, really, I'm glad I don't own a bricks and mortar store. It would be
Right.
tough.
Yeah, I think really over the last few years we were starting to see a big shift to e-commerce, and I think with what's going on right now, that's only going to amplify it. And to your point, it could be the end of brick and mortar businesses
Yes,
to an extent.
Yeah. In fact, I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal today that many of the brick and mortar, city stores are turning into warehouses
Wow.
for door-to-door delivery. So I think there's going to be a massive, just like a lot of the corporate office space is going to now become redundant,
Yep.
and there'll be an overage, and they might be turned into apartments or whatever.
Yeah.
It may be that some of this 40% or some of the estimates, 40% of excess corporate office space will actually solve some of the housing crisis in some of these cities.
Interesting.
That could be advocate. So I mean, we just don't know. But you
Right.
were asking me about what is regenerative farming, and
Hmm.
and we were heading down that path, and then we got everything relates to everything, so it's hard to not get sidetracked.
Right.
So 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 in general, what we want to see is, as a result of our farming, we want the commons to increase. What's the commons? Well, the commons is the collective equity of a place.
Hmm.
And so that collective equity includes water, potable water, not
Hmm.
polluted water,
Hmm.
soil, the amount of soil, and especially fertile soil, air, air quality, air abundance, all it. And then, of course, you have just the whole life diversity, both plant and animal and wildlife, including pollinators.
Yep.
And then you have social equity. You have the ability of people to build relationships, to share information, to collectively. I mean, we are collaborative beings, and we want to learn from each other, share our stories, share our experiences, and do that. So those are kind of the commons. And so a regenerative farming system, I think, develops all five of those,
Hmm.
and a bad farming system works against all those. So a farming system, for example, that destroys small towns, a farming system that destroys soil, that depletes water and or pollutes water,
Hmm.
that stinks up the air, that looks at wildlife and wild birds, for example, as a liability, not an asset. That's all indicative of a degenerative system as opposed to a regenerative system.
Interesting. It seems like the work that you're doing and your methods, it is normal. It is the healthy way to farm. But you mentioned, let's go back to the 80s where, you were focusing on pastured poultry, and people looked at you as crazy and like that was abnormal. How did we get there? Because that wasn't always the case, right? Like that wasn't always the way of farming. The I'm sorry, the way you are farming at some point I think was the right way. And so where did we go wrong? How did this all come to be where what you're doing is now abnormal?
Yeah. Well, I think I mean, it's like the frog in the pond. I mean, nobody sat down one day and said, "Let's invent factory farming." Nobody did that.
Right.
There was no conspiracy to do it, but I think it grew out of a few things. Um, Not the least of which was, as in the early 1900s. So we're looking at pre-World War II. Um, what happened was we had the industrial economy. We moved away from the agrarian economy to the industrial economy, and
Hmm.
that required urbanization. We needed people to work in factories and steel mills and stuff, and we had the early mechanization of the farm. So what happened was a farm that used to have, for example, 30 pigs, suddenly had 100 pigs or 150 pigs. Well, it's fine to run 30 pigs out in a 10-acre lot, maybe under an orchard or something.
Hmm.
But you start putting 150 pigs, now you have a moonscape, you've got hog cholera, odors, and all this. And the thing was, we didn't have plastic water pipe to deliver water. We didn't have electric fence to control. We didn't have the infrastructure to metabolize the scaling up of Grandpa's model. You know, in all innovation, there's this kind of ragged edge of innovation. You have this point of the spear of innovation, but then you have all this ancillary stuff around it that's required in order to metabolize it. And so what happened was we industrialized we scaled up our farms faster than our infrastructure was able to metabolize that.
Interesting.
And so the next step was, well, how do we minimize the damage we're doing, hog cholera, manure puddles in the dirt lot, you know, how do we minimize those things? Well, let's bring them in the house. It was all about, you know, how can we control the context of these animals so that we don't overrun the ecological nest, if you will. And it seemed at the time that the thing to do was to bring them into a building. Well, then they started to get sick because there were too many of them crammed in too close of quarters. So what really made factory farming possible was antibiotics. Antibiotics we were able to, the culture, not me, but the culture was able to administer antibiotics to override the pathogenicity, toxicity, fecal particulate, aerosols within these factory houses, and that purchased us some time. And so where I am is today. So I actually appreciate the dilemma of the farmers from 1915 to 1950 that were in this awkward period where there was scaling up, less labor, new mechanization, and a desire for additional efficiencies. Now, today, we have all the infrastructure necessary to be able to readapt the nature template of animal movement, pasturage, fresh air, sunlight, exercise, sanitation, hygiene, movement. We can now duplicate all of that because we have woven polyethylene shade cloth. We have water pipe to deliver water. We have front end loaders to handle biomass and carbon, wood chippers to turn trees into carbonaceous diapers. We have electric fence to be able to control the animals, and even we have electric fencing that can keep coyotes out of chickens and bears out of chickens and keep them in that only weighs 12 pounds for 150 feet of it. I mean, this was unheard of. It was not even imaginable for great grandpa.
Yep.
And so I cut some of those early fellows some slack. I don't demonize them.
Sure.
Same situation. I might have done the same thing, but now there is absolutely no reason for a single confinement house, a single factory farm, a single feedlot. There's no reason for a single bit of it in the entire planet.
Yeah. So we have the infrastructure and the resources available for healthy farming. Why aren't we doing this on a larger scale?
Well, you have to realize that during that whatever time of metabolism, the overriding orthodoxy of a mechanical view. So what happened? We developed a non-living view toward life. So we looked at life as simply nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus in the soil. That the soil is not really a living thing; it's just an inert substance that we intravenously plumb in. Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and all as well. And so there was a very chemical approach to that. There was a mechanical view toward life that we just grow it faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper, however, as cheaply as we can, as fast as we can, as big as we can, and all as well. There are no like life boundaries. There are no natural boundaries or limits to our cleverness, and so we just take this as far as we can. And what happened then, for me, the easiest, quickest way to say this, my soundbite for this is, if we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without, three-legged frogs, Rachel Carson, silent spring, and all sorts of things. But we didn't do that, and so that side gradually, overran. I'll just say our side. The life is fundamentally, or biology is fundamentally, about living things, and overran us. It dominated USDA policy. It dominated food service policy. It dominated the culture. It dominated, to the extent to which, in the 1950s, every official said, you don't want to eat that butter and lard. You want hydrogenated vegetable oil, and we got Crisco and that whole thing, and then then of course you want to use DDT and pesticides and poisons and it's not enough to have 5,000 chickens in a house. Let's make a bigger house. Let's put 10,000 chickens in it, and then let's make a bigger house. Let's put 20,000 chickens in it.
Yeah.
And so then as we enter into the 90s, as we enter into the late 80s and 90s, suddenly we started seeing popping up all these strange little phrases, E. coli, salmonella, listeria. You're not that old, but I can remember very well. I must have been, 45 before I ever even heard the phrase food allergy. I mean, it didn't exist. It didn't exist in the lexicon. If you wanted a birthday party for your 5-year-old daughter, you didn't have to call all the other moms and say, what are your kids allergic to? Right. It never even entered the context. If you wanted to go to a church potluck, you didn't think about, Miss Sally over there, she's allergic to nuts. You have to think about that kind of thing. And so what happened was, as we overran the limits of ecological and natural balance, nature fought back with a new lexicon of Listeria, Campylobacter, food allergy, and it was essentially life, a disrespected life on its knees, begging us, enough. Please stop it. It was like a woman being raped. Okay, enough. Stop. Right.
Yep.
And we, as a culture, as a Western culture, we came still with our conquistador hat on. Okay, and we're still going to pillage, conquer, dominate, and extract. And we're still, as a culture, that's still our mentality today.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to see the limits of it, which is one of the exciting things about the pandemic. Is for the first time in my life, it is not considered weird to move a conversation very quickly from how are you to well, how are you building your immune system? We've never had people just nonchalantly talking about, I want to build my immune system. That is. I mean, I get chill bumps like that. That's an exciting development from this pandemic, and I hope that tail is a long tail. I hope that it goes a long, long time. I don't want anybody to get sick. I don't want anybody to die. Yep. But the fact that this has put immunological functionality and things like the gut and the microbiome. Yep. I mean, 10 years ago, if you said the word microbiome, what language are you speaking? Today, everybody knows the term. It's wonderful.
It really is. It's really fascinating. I think it's absolutely a step in the right direction. The immune system is something, and to your point, I wasn't paying attention to the immune system and what I can be doing to help improve my immune system prior to the pandemic. So I think it's a great thing that we're talking about it. And I know it's something that you've talked about publicly too, is you having a very strong immune system. I think you've shared before that you haven't been sick in like 20 years. What are some things that you're doing to build your immune system?
Well, I think there's there are two lists. One is a don't do list, and one is a do list. One's negative, one's positive. So if you start on the negative, I don't drink soda, I don't smoke, I drink very little alcohol, and I don't eat fast food, I don't eat junk food. Look, everybody needs a Hershey's Kiss, once a month, okay? But there's a difference between that and eating, 2 candy bars a day or whatever. Yep. So go light on that. And of course, we eat mostly from our garden and our own stock. So, unprocessed, basically eating unprocessed, and not eating the junk. All right. So that's kind of on the negative side. On the positive side, so I already kind of went there. We try to eat, unprocessed. If you can't pronounce the ingredient list, put it back on the shelf. The ingredient list should be all pronounceable. Period. And that's one reason why Sina and I wrote the Beyond Labels book, was to help people to understand that labels are important, but what you're really after is, if the only relationship you have with your food is the label, you probably are not very connected. You want to go beyond that. And then beyond that, try to get a good night's sleep. I mean, I'm a sleeper. I mean, if I can get 8.5 hours, that's fantastic. Yep. I'm a crazy water drinker. I mean, I drink water. I drink like 3 quarts a day. Partly because, I've always worked hard and sweated. And so I just have and nothing quenches your thirst. I mean, not Gatorade, not, power drinks, forget the Red Bull, just really good quality water is great. And exercise, try to sweat 20 minutes a day. If you're in the city, go for a constitutional walk, so 20 minutes of kind of some good perspiration there. And outside in the vitamin D, get some sun. And then the final thing I'll say is forgiveness. And this doesn't seem like it goes with food or anything, but I'll tell you, we live in a time of everybody's on edge, and goodness, laugh. I mean, watch a Laurel and Hardy. I Love Lucy. I mean, Mayberry RFD. I mean, those tend to be but whatever comedy, just belly laugh a couple good times a day, laugh and forgive the people you hate. You can't change them anyway. Yep. And let that go. So that's kind of on the positive list.
I love that. I think you've touched on so many great things. Sleep and hydration are things that most people think they probably are getting enough of, and they might not be, especially in America. Activity and walking is a great thing. And I'm really happy you talked about forgiveness and laughing, because laughter, we know it makes us feel good. It's got so many benefits. And I think, like you said, we live in a world where everybody seems to be divided. It's always like me versus you and us versus them. And it's just such a division. And I think that creates so much anger and tension between us that has really negative impacts on us. So
yeah, it does. A couple little specific things that I would just say, just to help your folks, appreciate that it's not just all big picture stuff. So we don't have a TV in our house. We don't have a TV. So we can go places to see a TV if we want to see a show or want to see something. But we just, I grew up without a TV. Teresa and I have never had a TV, and so it's a distraction for a lot of things in life. So anyway, no TV. And then another thing that I'm kind of becoming famous for is that routinely I drink out of the water tank with the cows. So the cows are on this side, and I'm on this side, and I just bend down and I drink just like the cows and drink out of the water tank.
Really?
They're dripping saliva and whatever. And now I don't do that if the water's a little bit murky or whatever, but if it's good, if it's well watered, good potable water, I do that on purpose, just to help feed, diversity into my microbiome. I mean, that's all. If I go pick a carrot in the garden, I don't go wash it off and dump chlorine on it. I just brush it off on my leg. And if I eat a few pieces of dirt, well, I can always envision in my mind, that all those little actinomycetes and gibberellins and mycelia come down into my gut, and they meet their second cousins, down in my gut. And they're, oh, hi, cousin. It's been a long time since I've seen you. They have this wonderful reunion down there between the soil and my gut, and I think there's a real benefit in just kind of living in that real close visceral relationship with our ecological womb. I think it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I think that's super important for the ability to build your microbiome. One thing that I'm a little concerned about with quarantine, and I understand people are staying at home and staying away from public places for a reason, obviously. But I do fear that maybe we're going to put our immune system at risk or in jeopardy of not strengthening that immune system because we're not around other people, we're not around other bacteria and certain things that will actually strengthen that gut.
Yeah, well, if you're aware of the hygiene hypothesis, the hygiene hypothesis is put out by a lot of allergists, and this is the premise of it. Now, and many allergist doctors have signed on to this idea. I'm not sure it's been completely tested, but it makes sense to me that your immune system is essentially a great big muscle. And, muscles atrophy if they don't get used. And so the hygiene hypothesis says we have become so clean and sanitary and antimicrobial that we're actually not exercising our immune system enough. And then when something comes in to assault it, it doesn't have the strength to combat that issue. This morning, we're getting late in the season, and one of our apple trees is finally making some ripe apples. So I walked by and picked an apple off the tree, and I didn't wash it. I didn't do anything. The whole thing, I just ate it exactly like it was. It might have had some ants crawling on it at one time. It might have had, who knows? This microscopic world. I mean, I tell people, if we could take an electron microscope and look at ourselves in that, all of us would have an aura like Pigpen in the Peanuts comic strip. You walk around with all this dust swirling around, and that's the way we are. And our systems are set up for my dust cloud to intersect with your dust cloud, and that guy's dust cloud and that guy's dust cloud, and it's in that intersection that herd immunity gets built, and our own systems become exercised.
Yeah, that's super interesting. To be careful we don't overprotect ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, babies don't develop immune systems growing up in a bubble. They crawl around on the floor and eat dust bunnies, and everything goes in their mouth, but that's how they develop an immune system.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'd like to get back to the factory farming that we were touching on. I'm sorry if I took us off on a tangent there, but with factory farming, why does it even exist still? Is it because it's easier to feed the masses and it's cheaper, or what's the reasoning behind it?
Well, factory farming has a modicum of efficiency. I think we've got to appreciate there's a big difference between efficiency and effectiveness. So the problem with factory farming, yes, it's extremely efficient if you don't put in the collateral damage. So if you don't put in the dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico, if you don't put in MRSA and C. diff and superbugs, last week 20 pharmaceutical companies announced that they're dumping $1 billion into a fund to help finance super drugs to try to stay a step ahead of super bugs and super drugs, that the super bugs are developing faster than the drugs, and so there's a cost there. I mean what is the lack of effectiveness? Look, there are absolute places where we want antibiotics. I'm glad we have them, but they should be used very judiciously. And if they were used judiciously, they'd be around for a long time. But we use them as if it's just, confetti, and let's just throw them everywhere. And then the bugs, of course, develop immunity to it. Of course, then again, you have the whole nutrient profile. I mean, the fact that these factory farmed animals, they live in toxicity, they're constantly stressed. One of the most interesting things that we're really that we've seen for years and years, and it's just becoming more obvious to us as we work with chefs all over, is that all of our meats cook about 20% faster than regular, conventionally grown meats.
Wow.
We don't have an absolute answer for that, but our sense is that because our animals are grown stress-free, their tissue is not full of adrenaline. And animals in factory farms are completely emotionally stressed. They're socially stressed, they're toxicity stressed, they're immunologically stressed, they're nutritionally stressed because they're only fed to, calories. They're not fed a balanced diet. They get no salad bar. They get no vitamin D. They get no sunshine. They're completely nutritionally. So when you add up, a toxic environment, no exercise, no sunshine, a deficient diet, you have a tremendous, and social, living in with, 20,000 other animals, you have stress. And so imagine your entire life is you've been secreting this stress, this adrenaline into your tissue.
Yeah.
And we've done tests where we've taken regular, conventional chicken in two identical crock pots, cooked them for the same amount of time. The one from the store, it's just sitting there, look like plastic, and ours is completely in a heap of broth at the bottom. I mean, it completely just falls apart. And so our chefs tell us this all the time: pork, beef, everything, it cooks way faster. And the only thing we can think is that it's this stress thing. It's this constant life of stress. So
that's fascinating. So do you think the animals that have been grown in factory farms, they have built defense mechanisms in their tissues? Is that what you think?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
You've heard of fight or flight. All right.
Yep.
So imagine if your entire life you're in fight mode. I mean, basically, your entire life is PTSD. In fact, It's not PTSD. It's just TD, traumatic.
Yeah.
It's not post-traumatic. It's just traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And so you're basically in a war zone your whole life. You can never relax. You can never get away from the assault of whether it's social toxicity or whatever. And whereas our animals, we move them every day, so they're not on their toilet from yesterday. They get their bedding and linens changed every day. Yep. And it's a completely different kind of life. And so the factory farming has this mystique of being efficient, and look how much we can produce in such a little space, and blah blah blah.
Yep.
But the fallout from it is profound, and what they don't show you is the fish kills, the aromatically compromised air, all of the different elements of it, including nutrient deficiency. I mean, we about 8 years ago, Mother Earth News magazine solicited a request. They said, anybody that does pastured eggs, we want to do a nutrient test to compare them to the official USDA label, because we want to put to rest once and for all that there's difference within apples and eggs and carrots and T-bone steaks and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sent our eggs, and there were about 12 of us around the country to send our eggs in, and they measured about 8 nutrient components. One was folic acid, which is real important for pregnant women. Mm-hmm. And the regular USDA folic acid per egg is registered at like 48 micrograms per egg. Our eggs measured 1,038 micrograms per egg. I mean, this is not a 10% difference. This is an almost, it's a multiplicative difference. And we see that in many things. I mean, grass-finished beef, 300% more riboflavin than grain-finished beef. It just takes, and riboflavin, of course, is the stress B vitamin. And I can't help but think that when there's no carotenes and none of these, I mean, it's grains don't have vitamins and minerals. They have carbohydrates. Grains are carbohydrate. Bread, carbohydrates, all right? If you want vitamins and minerals and you want greens, you want salad, you want greens, okay? And it's the same in the animals. And in the industry, animals don't get any greens. All they get is carbohydrate,
right?
And then they don't even have any exercise to go with it. So then you get an unexercised, simplified diet in a stressful situation, and you wonder. So that's supposed to make me vibrant and healthy and stress free.
Yep.
Well, you don't take that whatever feedstock, I don't care what it is, and create the eater of the feedstock can never be more vibrant than the feedstock itself. Yeah. Whether that feedstock is a plant, an animal, or whatever. Yep. And so that's the issue. So as soon as we move to a different model, then that is a model that is effective rather than just efficient, then you start actually dialing into the price tag, the better management, the ecological function, the fact that now we have bumblebees, and you start dialing that in. Well, you find out that that $1.29 chicken doesn't cut it. You can't raise it for that. And what that means is then people start having to make a decision. Well, do I go to Las Vegas on a gambling trip, or do I put my $2,000 in eating better so I feel better so I don't have to go to the doctor? Those kinds of decisions have to start being made. There's plenty of money in the system, to eat well. I mean, and you start falling in love with your kitchen. You don't do as much takeout. You start getting whole foods, unprocessed foods, and you use all your techno-glitzy gadgets in the kitchen to make them yourself. Right. And that's how you eat cheaply. Right now today, you can buy a polyface chicken at less per pound than a boneless, skinless breast from Tyson at Walmart. Wow. But you'd be surprised how many people can't imagine buying anything but a boneless, skinless breast. Yep. They think we pluck these off a tree out of here somewhere, like we're picking boneless, skinless breasts off like apples off a tree.
That's so fascinating. And I don't think most people even realize that. And while we're at it, we might as well give you a plug here so they can find that on the Polyface Farm website, correct?
Yes.
Is that polyfacefarms.com?
Polyface Farms. If you just type in POLY, it'll probably finish it for you.
Yep. Very good.
And we have an extensive website with everything from information to to product to if you want to wear a T-shirt that says everything I want to do is illegal, you can get one of those.
I love it. That's great. Going back to some of the things that you were mentioning, I've heard different nutritionists say, we know the saying, you are what you eat, but it's not just what we eat. We are what the thing we ate. So kind of what you were saying, it's super important to look at what the animals and the meats that we're eating, what did they eat? And most people don't think about that, I don't think.
Yeah, and frankly, their habitat. I think we don't appreciate too how much their whole habitat actually when our cow actually in the field goes out and has a cornucopia of 30 different plants, some legumes, some grass, some forbs, some plantain, a little bit of burdock. And so she's eating all those different kinds. She's diversifying her diet. And each one of those brings to the complexity of her tissue, brings that complexity to her tissue. We don't begin to understand all this, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that if I want a diversified, who knows but what I've got one bacteria in my microbiome that is yearning for a piece of beef with some plantain enzyme in it.
Yep.
Who knows? How are we going to get that if we only eat beef from an animal that's eating corn and soybeans?
Yep.
And a little bit of alfalfa.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Exactly. We've talked about factory farming feeding the masses, and I think we've talked about this a bit here, but I want to maybe hear a little bit more from you on, can your methods of regenerative farming, can that feed the masses? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would say that long term, it's the only thing that actually can feed the masses.
Hey guys, so at this point in the interview, we were experiencing some Wi-Fi issues, and unfortunately we were not able to wrap up the interview with Joel. He does live in rural Virginia on the farm and occasionally experiences some Wi-Fi issues, and that's what happened at this point in our conversation. So if you want to learn more about Joel and his work, you can visit his website at polyfacefarms.com. Thanks so much for listening.